Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories Podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. It is November 22nd, 2019, almost Thanksgiving time, almost Turkey Day. We are here post-Thrive, very excited for the Thrive event that just happened last Sunday, where over 1,700 people filled the Salt Palace, and we had an amazing day celebrating healing and growth beyond Mormonism. It was a great event. Thanks to everyone who came. Mormon Stories has been cranking out a lot of content recently. We've got a lot more to cover, but if some of you remember, several months ago, we interviewed Katie and Alan Mount from the Marriage on a Tightrope podcast. They have a podcast that's amazing, that's dedicated to supporting Mormons in mixed faith marriages. We had them at the original Thrive event, and they came on Mormon Stories to tell their stories and to talk about marriage on a tightrope and to talk about their tips on navigating a mixed faith marriage. When we did that, we also committed to our listeners and viewers that we would go ahead and do our own series on navigating a mixed faith marriage. And this series is a little bit like the Losing the Lamanites series or the Opiate Addiction series or the interview with Bishop series, where instead of doing these long, epic 8-hour interviews like we just did with RFM or others, the goal is to jump right into the issue at hand. Maybe they're briefer, 1 to 2 hour interviews. Maybe they don't go into total depth of the full story, but it's for people who are in a mixed faith marriage who want to get 5 or 6 examples of how other couples have done it, how they've done it successfully. That's what we're doing. So you can expect a shorter interview today, couple hours, and we're going to be focusing on the story of Justin and Polly Brown, who are here with us in studio today. Now, I should warn people, Justin and Holly were interviewed on Marriage on a Tightrope podcast. We have no problem re-interviewing people that other podcasts have interviewed, although I can't take credit for discovering Justin and Polly first, because they originally came to a Mormon Stories Retreat, and that's where I met them. And I think they had a good experience. We sure loved having them, and that's how I met them. So, Alan and Katie, as awesome as you are, I discovered them first. But also, I just want to quickly mention that we are starting up our Mormon Stories retreats and workshops again, and we're going to be doing one in St. George just in a couple weeks. And in addition to having a great weekend, I think it's the 6th through the 8th of December, but check the calendar. But it's going to be an amazing retreat for people in faith crisis, mixed faith marriages, healthy sexuality, mental health, all the great stuff that we do. Please go to mormonstories.org/events or mormonfaithcrisis.com/events. You can find the St. George event and sign up. We have some underwriters who are funding the event. So if you can afford the event, just come, pay, and come. If you can't afford the event, or if you just want to have fun, we have an underwriter who is going to subsidize anyone's registration fees. We'll ask you to pay lunch or whatever you can afford, but don't not come because of financial reasons. The underwriter is going to subsidize you. We're also going to be doing caravans in our vans, kind of karaoke vans, from Salt Lake to St. George and back, leaving on Friday, coming back on Sunday. So we'll have a blast traveling there, so you can get transportation taken care of. And we have a few donors who have offered their houses to give people free lodging. So there's literally no reason to not come unless you have obligations. But financially, we can cover your lodging. We can cover your registration fees and transportation, as long as you can bring yourself and your vulnerability and your willingness to work. And of course, for anyone who can afford any of those things, we really appreciate those who can pay, because that pays for the organizers who are organizing this event. So anyway, come to the St. George Retreat in a couple weeks, early December. I think it's the 6th to 8th-ish. We'll also be presenting at the St. George or the Southern Utah Post-Mormon group that Sunday. That should be fun as well. So check it out. Please join us again, mormonstories.org/events or mormonfaithcrisis.com/events. And message us if you have any trouble with that. Okay. So without any further ado, we are so thrilled to have with us today on Mormon Stories a couple that I've wanted to interview for some time. The couple is Polly and Justin Brown. And they are here today to talk about how they have navigated their mixed faith marriage. And they are still in a mixed faith marriage, as probably everyone is at some level, because we all have different beliefs about different things. But this isn't one of those mixed faith marriages where, the believer had to lose all their beliefs for the couple to actually get along. Who knows what will happen in the future? But for now, they're still in a mixed faith marriage and they're finding a way to make it work. So our intention with this series is to just give people hope, to give people tips and tricks, and to help people learn how, if they're in that tough situation or if they will be someday, how to navigate it. So that's our intent. That's why we're doing this. Justin and Polly, welcome to Mormon Stories Podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
How was that introduction? Did I miss anything?
No, that was fantastic.
That's perfect.
Did okay?
Yeah.
All right. Anything you guys want to start with before we dig in?
No. I mean, do you?
Did I
No.
get anything wrong?
No,
No,
I think you got it
that's
all right.
great.
We're good. I'm assuming we're on camera. I have no idea
You're
how this
live.
works.
You're live on the
Cool.
internet.
I'm happy it's not an 8-hour thing, I will say.
You were ready for whatever because that's how I roll.
I think I was ready. Yeah.
Huh?
I'm ready for whatever. We're ready.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are going to tell you a brief story of kind of your years in the church and how you met each other and how you got married and kind of what the foundations were for your marriage, what the expectations were. And then we'll talk about when and how things changed, and we'll dig deep on kind of what that was like, how hard it was, how you navigated it, what things were useful, and then kind of where you've landed up together.
Love it.
And where you're going to go from here.
Yeah.
And I'll talk, I'll jump in when I need to, but I'm also happy to just let you guys roll.
All right.
Okay. Yeah.
It's his fault. No, just kidding.
It's all Justin's fault.
Totally my fault.
You can go first.
Who wants to go first?
Yeah.
So tell us just your quick Mormon background.
Well, I'm definitely a Mormon. Born and raised here in Salt Lake City, Cottonwood Heights. That's where I grew up.
Is that the high school? Cottonwood
Went to
Heights?
Brighton High School.
Okay.
Yep. Went to the University of Utah. We've been here our whole lives. I went on a mission. I think it's important to say, or it's worth saying, that I grew up in a family that was active. My dad was in the bishopric at one time, but they were not terribly orthodox people. My mom and dad both came. My mom was divorced early in life. My dad had been married once before. That's not terribly unusual, but they both were drinkers when they were younger. I have these stories that my dad smoked way back in the day. So and then on Sundays we went to church almost every Sunday unless we were camping, and my family camped a lot. So my dad loved to camp. So we weren't a terribly orthodox LDS family. But we were active. Like I said, there was a period where my dad was...
Is that kind of common in Utah, where there are families that are doing the Mormon thing, but not super intense?
I think so.
I feel like it.
I think so.
Yeah.
I'm always surprised when I come across people who were super intense, because we just weren't that way.
Yeah.
We didn't have to stay in our Sunday clothes, but I've heard of people who did.
Yeah, we didn't go to church when we were on vacation.
Yeah, no, my dad didn't. We didn't do that. Yeah. So Polly and I did that a couple times in the early part of our marriage, but
we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, we're getting ahead there.
So a Mormon family that wasn't super intense.
Yeah, they weren't super intense. That's a good way to say it. I went on a mission. I was a little bit older when I went on a mission. When I got my first job.
So you did the seminary thing?
I did seminary, but when I was 16, I started working, and I had to work on a Sunday, and figured out that my parents wouldn't make me go to church if I didn't want to, even though they were going. And so I stopped going to church when I was about 16, right after I turned 16. And I was totally inactive basically until I was a little over 20. And then I had kind of what I used to call a spiritual experience.
Tell us about that.
Well, I was 20. I mean, the way I frame this story now is different than I would have a few years ago.
How would you have framed it after you became Orthodox?
Back then,
Yeah.
that I was lost and that I was struggling and that I needed guidance and help. And I think that's still probably fair.
Did life get messy when you weren't active in the church?
No.
Okay.
I was way into snowboarding growing up.
I just went snowboarding this morning.
Well, that's great.
Wow.
Good for you. That's where I would.
That's where he
Rest
goes.
in
Yeah.
peace, Mr. Burton, who passed away recently.
Yeah,
Did you hear
just
about that?
2 days ago or yesterday. Yeah, he passed away. It's a bummer. So yeah, I loved snowboarding. So I would just go snowboarding on Sundays with all my friends, and that was way easier and way better. But I kind of had that moment when I was a little over 20. A lot of my friends had gone on missions. A lot of my friends were still preparing to go on missions. We were a pretty tight-knit group of kids, still are, and there were quite a few who weren't going or who weren't members. And I was falling into that crowd, and I just kind of felt lost and wasn't sure. I wasn't really reaching what I thought was my full potential. I wasn't going to college seriously. I was just kind of getting, I was spending a lot of time snowboarding and just playing around. And I look at that now and I say, well, yeah, that's what 20-year-old kids do. But back then I was conditioned, I think, to believe that was a bad thing, that I was on a bad path or a dark road or whatever you want to call it. And so I did what Mormon kids do in those situations. I said a prayer, and I was not much of a prayer. I hadn't, like I said, I'd been inactive most of my teenage years, and I never really had a terribly strong testimony of the church or anything like that. But I said a prayer, and I did have what I think we could call a spiritual experience or an epiphany, and I kind of came to the conclusion that I needed to go on a mission. That was the answer, if you want to call it that I got. Again, I don't want to be negative about that experience. I think it was a wonderful experience for me, but I do now look at it as something that I was conditioned in some senses to experience. Anyway, said a prayer, got an answer, and decided that I was going to go on a mission. So I did. About a year later, I went on a mission, and I went to the Philippines, to the Tacloban mission. Loved it. Still to this day, loved my mission. I loved learning. I got to learn a couple languages. The people were amazing. The place was amazing. It was a very third world, rural, poor part of the Philippines. And I mean, the Philippines is poor in general, but it was especially poor. And that was super eye-opening for me. I wouldn't trade that experience. It was so fun, and it was so valuable for me. So I did that, gained a very strong testimony while I was there of the church, but couldn't really get my hands on anything to read other than the standard scriptures, or what, I don't remember what all the general works books were, those red books that we could read. Like,
It was like Jesus
is the Christ, yeah. Which I read.
Marvel's Working a Wonder,
All that, yeah.
Miracle of Forgiveness.
I read all that stuff.
James Talmage, basically.
Do
John
people just
Winslow.
read Miracle of Forgiveness? Just
I
to
read
read
it. It was awful. But so I read all those books. I love reading. I came home and just wanted to keep reading and wanted to learn so much more about the church, because in the mission, especially, I don't know what missions are like stateside or in fully developed countries, but in the Philippines, we didn't have that many options. Especially back then, we'd get like the ensign with the conference talks a long while after they happened, So anyway, I read a ton while I was there, but it was only the approved stuff. And then when I got home, I just could not get my hands on enough stuff, started reading all the other books that I could find, entered some institute classes up at the U where I was going to school, and just really studied Mormonism for several years.
Well, you got married too.
Yes.
Yes.
I did get married. We got married quick, like 6 months after I got home. And we knew each other before I left, and we wrote throughout my mission. We were married in the temple.
Okay, wait. We'll pause on that part.
Sure.
So you made it, non-intense Mormon upbringing, but had your awakening, served the mission, came home, and by the time you got home, you had firm testimony?
Yeah, all in at that point.
All in at that point.
All in, yeah, for sure.
Had you like been a zone leader or any of
Yeah,
that stuff?
all that's. I mean,
Okay.
yeah, you do all that stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, I was all in. Served a really cool mission. I loved it. Worked really hard.
And you were at the U.
I went to the U. I ended up getting a degree in English and another degree in political science.
Yeah.
And that's Polly pointed this out actually at your Mormon Stories conference that we went to. That's probably a year and a half ago now that we did that. She mentioned this, that she said that I have been going through this faith transition, if we want to call it that, forever, is the way you described it, since we got married. Mm-hmm. And I think what that refers to is that I was always reading. And I was getting my hands on all sorts of books, approved, LDS Church approved books and not. And I had an institute professor up at the U who was so awesome, and he was not afraid to talk about some of the unsavory historical and doctrinal issues. That's where I first learned about Joseph Smith's polygamy and the peepstones and all these things.
Okay.
A lot of these things.
We'll come back to that.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, that was me and then we got married.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So, Polly, let's do your quick story. And
Okay.
then I want to hear your version of the courtship.
Oh, okay.
All right.
My life's a little boring. I didn't snowboard.
Whatever.
I grew up here in Utah. Went to Skyline. Grew up in Sandy. Fantastic family. I feel like we were very active, but also not. Just meaning.
Your folks aren't uptight.
Yeah.
At all.
But they both have strong testimonies. We went to church, but if we were on vacation, we didn't go. Kind of like that, But my brothers went on missions, kind of what you did. I have one sister that's not active at all out of the 6 kids, but everyone else is very active. Great childhood, great ward, great family, everything.
Would you
Kinda
say you had a
just-
testimony in high school? By
Yeah.
the time you reached high school?
Yeah, I would. Yep. I never had a desire to go on a mission, but
Back then, it wasn't as
I don't think
expected, right?
for girls. Yeah. And I don't know. The church was a comfortable place, like I always never had any issues with bishops or anything like that. It was just kind of what you did, and it felt right and it felt good. It was where you wanted to be, I guess. Yeah. So I always active. Went to, did a little bit at the community college, and then I started assisting an endotontist. So that's what I did for years. And then met Justin. See, I'm boring. I don't
No.
It's not
pretty
Stop
much
that.
it.
It's all good.
Stop
And
it.
then, Justin and I met and did the quick Mormon typical get married
Okay.
fast, right?
So let's ask you first, Polly. Like
Okay.
when you were thinking about your eternal companion, tell us like who you were looking for and what you expected, how you envisioned your life kind of playing out.
Okay. And that's interesting because I'm sure I have 2 or 3 lists from when you're in Young Women's. Write down
They had you make?
what you're looking for, what you want. And it's returned missionary, someone that holds the priesthood,
Yep.
someone that's going to provide, good father, things like that. That's what you look for.
And your life was going to be like what?
Like we'd get married in the temple, and I would stay home and raise our kids, and it's all
And you
good,
have how
right?
many kids?
We have 4 kids.
But is that what you wanted? You wanted,
I think I did want 4.
yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you want 1?
No, I would think I always thought 3.
Yeah.
Was
We
the right
had
number?
3 and felt like we weren't done. But I get really sick when I'm pregnant. So we adopted our 4th, and it was awesome.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
But at the time, you wanted
4 kids.
4 kids.
Yeah.
And
6 was too much. 4 felt like a safe number.
And did you kind of think of yourself as more into the church than your parents? Were you like, I'm going to be intense about
No.
Mormonism? Or were you?
No.
No.
Like, never thought of myself getting up early with the kids and reading scriptures. Like, that's a lot. But definitely going to church every Sunday, taking the kids to primary activities.
Sure.
I taught nursery for 6 years. My heavens.
Yeah, we did all that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I definitely, even though I think you're raised in the church to, you're a stay-at-home mom, that's your role, that's what you do, but that truly is what I wanted to do. I could have worked, I could have kept going with my career, but
Yeah, you didn't. I would say you didn't want to do that because the church told you to. I think that's just
something I would have chosen to do anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
And what did you see in Justin that made you feel like he checked the boxes? And what was it a matter of him checking the boxes, or was it like you like became super best friends?
This is interesting.
We're kind of
thought about it
soulmates.
this way. Her mom likes me. That's what it was really about. Because she does. I love your mom.
you.
She's so awesome.
You know what? I think I was just drawn to Justin, who he is as a person and just himself, but he happened to check all the boxes. So that was probably a win-win. Yeah.
And this is important. And this is the coach in me coming out a little bit. Some people marry their best friend. Other people marry the church. And the person that they marry just kind of fits, like I say, checks the boxes.
It's one of those molds, yeah.
And let's just say that's a continuum.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on where you fall in the continuum is probably going to predict a lot about how things go when one of you loses their faith. Because most often when you marry your just total best friend, if they lose their faith, it's just like, well, that's no big deal. You're my best friend. So like, it's hard, but I'm not giving up on you.
Yeah.
But if really you married someone who was a square in a square slot that you expected them to fit in, and you really did marry sort of your dreams about your church experience and just a ball of flesh that kind of fit in your dreams, then you're going to have a much harder time if they leave the church.
Totally. And luckily, I guess I married you for you,
Right.
and you happen to have everything else
Right.
that I thought I needed. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so.
But also, no matter what, like when this faith thing happened, like it shakes you and you think, wait a minute.
Okay. So let's see. So Justin did fit the boxes for you, but you also liked him, liked his personality, thought he was a good fit.
Yep.
Okay. So to what extent, when you guys started dating and started thinking about marriage, to what extent did you guys like talk explicitly about what the expectations were church-wise, or was it just sort of like assumed? Does that make sense?
I feel like it was just assumed.
Just assumed, yeah.
Yeah. We met before his mission, and then he left on his mission, and we wrote really well, but I still dated other people. I don't think I was waiting for him,
Right.
but I was hoping to date you when you came back.
Sure.
And then when he came back, we just picked right back up where we
just
left off.
clicked,
It
for
was
sure.
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
And our dating was just easy. We lucked out. Like there wasn't any breaking up, getting back together. We just fit.
Yeah,
It was
I think so.
easy.
We
Yeah.
had to do all of our fighting after we got married.
Well, welcome to marriage. Welcome to marriage. You
Yeah.
think it's going to be any different for you than the
Oh
rest
my
of us?
heavens.
Probably not. No.
Work, eh? Well, I want to know what his answer is to that question.
Yeah. What,
No, I don't think that.
Did you think she wants kids? Check.
No, I mean, I think that we talked about that. I think we talked about some of the big issues, but again, my parents weren't terribly uptight about the church, and I don't think yours were either. I think your family is a little more active or adhering than mine, but I don't know. I think we both just kind of assumed, yeah, she's LDS, I'm LDS. We both knew that we wanted to get married in the temple. We both knew that we wanted to have kids. To me, that was really all that actually is all that really mattered, you know? But getting married in the temple was important to me. I can say that. I came home from the mission pretty staunchly observant about some things like that.
Yeah.
So,
and you both wanted to be temple worthy and all that?
Yep.
for sure. Yep.
Were there any signs, during the engagement or, in those early years of marriage where either of you wondered if the other was really fully into the church or whether your plan had some cracks in it, or
Not for me.
Or did you start off just total gung ho?
I think we were gung ho, and he was like right off his mission, so he was still in that missionary bubble. He was like pretty Mormon
phase.
kid, yeah. So yeah, no question.
Okay.
And we'd both lived outside of the church a little bit. Like we both partied before when we were in high school. So we weren't, even in our own marriage, I don't think we were ever terribly orthodox. We went to church often and we both held callings, but we would go out to eat on Sunday, or we would go to movies on Sunday.
But we also would go to the temple once a week sometimes.
Yeah. We were pretty
I guess
in.
we had our things
for a few,
that we
for a few years, we were
loved.
very in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So you got married at the U, is that right? Were you at the U?
I was at the U.
Just was at the U.
Yep.
Got married in the Salt Lake Temple.
And you were still an endodontist
Yep.
assistant?
Assisting root canals and surgeries and all that fun, yucky stuff. Is that better?
That's good.
Okay,
Can help you.
cool. So,
Thank you.
so how many years was it just kind of like the Orthodox Mormon thing versus when did the cracks start showing up? Or is there anything important to your story that you want to tell prior to when the cracks started emerging?
Well, got married, waited 4 years, and then started our family. And
Yeah, we had Ellie when we were
we did
4 years
institute
married.
classes together.
Yeah.
And this institute teacher was awesome. He would talk about women in the priesthood, and he would bring up big things.
John Peterson. That's his name. He's so awesome.
that I think we were able to talk about at that time. And nothing came too big of a shock to me when he started really going into the church history and things like that. I feel like that helped because this was pre-kid.
Remember we went to a documentary about the Mountain Meadows Massacre? Mm-hmm. I mean, we were like 2 years married when we didn't even have kids yet.
Yeah.
And we just kind of came out of a lot of those experiences. They were kind of faith-affirming experiences.
Right.
They weren't really tearing down our faith. And some of it was shocking, and we were doing some mental gymnastics to make it work, I think. Mm-hmm. But we did.
Yeah.
We stayed in it. I think at least this is how I felt, is that wasn't really why I was in the church. You know, those things didn't really matter that much to me. But there came a time when they definitely did.
Yeah. So Justin kept reading, I don't know, what were you reading? Different things, and
I read A Rough Stone Rolling a long time ago during that period.
Okay, you were married what year about?
we
We were married in
in
01.
01.
Yep.
Okay, so Rough Stone Rolling came out in like 2004, 2005.
Yep.
So
And I was
Yeah.
I read it right when it came out,
Yeah.
or right after it came out. Yeah.
And I don't even remember you talking to me about it. I never read it.
Yeah. We talked a little bit, but not much.
So there's kind of a mentality back in the day when you're a Mormon where it's like it's cool if you're a Mormon. And I don't mean to make this a male thing. I can't speak for females, but for males, you know, there's a type of missionary or a type of Mormon guy that was like, yeah, part of your priesthood responsibilities is to get to know church history and to understand doctrine and be like
For sure.
a McConkie and dig in deep and have interesting things to say during elders quorum. And
Right.
I don't know if that's you. Or maybe
I didn't really
projecting.
care to say anything interesting in elders quorum, but yeah, I just like to study. I'm just a studious person. I like to read. I like history. I just like to dig into stuff. Like I said, on my mission, I couldn't because I was limited to what was available to read. So when I got home, it was like a 5 or 6 year period where I just was really studying church history.
Yep.
Yeah.
And in your mind, Justin, were you starting to have doubts, or was it just like, oh, it's interesting
Yeah,
stuff?
I think so. I mean, there were a lot of things that I just found incredulous or that I couldn't reconcile or make sense of. But I had this mission experience that at the time I looked at as something that saved my life.
Did you tell us that?
Well, I mean, I explained that I had these doubts, and I had this when I was 20. A lot of my friends were leaving on missions, and a lot
Right.
were, and I felt lost, and I felt confused, and I felt like I was on a terribly dark road, and I probably wasn't on the best road. Looking at it now, I think it's probably a road that a lot of 20-year-old kids were on or are on, and they're fine. But that's the way I saw it back then in my mid 20s to late 20s.
It's going nowhere.
Well, I saw that I was probably going nowhere, and so I saw the church and definitely the mission as something that really helped me.
And as a different path, maybe.
Yeah, and I will say it did really help me. I'm a good student, and I was just like kind of floating, not really committed to a school. And when I came home from my mission, I was all in, full time at the U, graduated in 4 years, got great grades, 2 degrees, started a business. The business was doing great, bought a house. Like, I kind of attributed all this positive life trajectory to double down in the church and to go on a mission. Does that make sense?
Yeah, why not, right? I mean,
it made sense to me. Yeah. So, but I did see some cracks. I did see some things that were super troubling. Like I said, we came across the Mountain Meadows Massacre. And it's funny when I think back on it, Polly and I both just said, well, the church leaders are fallible and the church isn't perfect and it makes mistakes. But again, we were still able to believe that was then, and that of course church leaders are fallible. And I don't think either of us ever expected Brigham Young or Joseph Smith or anybody else to be perfect. So when we came across these problems, these issues with those people particularly, we kind of were able to look past it, I think.
That's easy reasoning. Yeah.
Yeah, we were able to, the mental gymnastics, we were like, well, you can't judge Brigham Young. Rough Stone Rolling says it. It's a cultural biography. You can't judge Joseph Smith in 2005 according to 2005 standards because the guy was around in the 1830s and 40s, And that made perfect sense to me, and I think that's what we did. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So when did things start going sideways? Like how many years into the marriage?
When did your podcast come out?
So my podcast came out in 2005. I don't like to hear the Mormon stories.
I'm totally
is the
kidding.
impetus.
She knew.
But,
I'm just kidding.
It started in we actually know the story because we talked about this on Alan
But you
and
are a
Katie's
fan,
podcast.
and you listen to so
Oh, I
many.
love Mormon Stories. It's the best.
It.
And we will say we love. You didn't meet us at your conference at the Mormon Stories Retreat.
I met you before.
Yep, we came up and did a counseling session with you and Margie, and it was so awesome.
Well, I can't tell that. That's your
I know.
story to
See,
tell.
he kept that
there you go.
confidential.
Confidentiality.
That's right.
Yeah.
I get it now. I think the crack started, Paula. You can tell me
What
if this
year
is
was
not
that
right.
when we went and talked to them? It was
So
before
I
Ziggy.
think the first real crack started with Prop 8 when I think back to it.
Yep.
Because we have a really good friend who, and John, you know him, Sean Rasmussen. He met with you, I think, a couple times just as like a friend. And his sister's gay. Mm-hmm. And so he kind of started pushing buttons a little bit with us, trying to like poke the bear a little about our beliefs. And he was still a believing Mormon, all in at that time. But he was struggling with that a little bit more openly than we were. And I think that's when it began. And then it kind of started unraveling to the point to where one day Sean sent an email to some friends, including me, that was like, hey, I'm really struggling. So I had a friend who was really struggling in his faith. That's really what it comes down to. And I told him, I said, well, dude, I will jump in with you, because I'd been studying a lot of this stuff. And I thought, my ego thought, oh, I can help Sean. I can help Sean get through this and stay faithful. It's so funny to think about it now, the way I reacted. It was just such a, like, I'm gonna be able to help Sean get through this. And really what ended up happening is Sean helped me so much see things that I wasn't seeing before. So I think that's it. That was like 2010-ish, right? Mm-hmm. When that happened. I think the Prop 8 thing, neither one of us felt good about that.
Right.
We got to a place really quickly because of Sean where we were like, yeah, the church is just wrong. Their stance on the gay issue is just wrong.
And at the time, we didn't have anyone in our close family that was gay.
That we knew about?
Yeah, that we knew about. Now we do.
Right.
But at the time, it's kind of easy to just kind of push it aside and be like, well, it's not affecting us right now, And
they're wrong, and they'll get better.
Yeah. Or the church will come around.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, the church will get better.
Yeah. But in 2010, these were little things. He was still going to church. We were still all in.
Yeah, I think so.
But he was just exploring more on the side.
But my faith was definitely falling apart. My traditional beliefs in the church were definitely not you know, the way I've always described it is it was kind of like brick by brick. There was this wall that was being built that is kind of the wall of I no longer believe this stuff. Prop 8 was one of them, and I could list a whole bunch more. But I think that's when the cracks started.
But I don't think it affected our marriage at that point.
I don't think so either.
No, because you were in it for years, just reading and researching.
And then Sean and I dove into your podcasts, into Mormon Stories, and we dove into a lot of other stuff as well. I remember just laughing so much about the Infants on Thrones podcasts. I learned a ton from those guys and from you. And so we just started diving into it. And then I would come home to Polly and be like, you are not going to believe this. And a lot of this stuff we'd heard. But for some reason, I was just looking at it from a different perspective now, maybe not so much of a believing perspective. And I'd come home and sometimes Polly would be like, yeah, I don't want to hear that. And I had to be sensitive to that. And sometimes I pushed it too far, I think. But I tried really hard not to. And then I don't know what you think, but I think the cracks started happening in our marriage in 2015. So it's been 14. Yep.
So Polly, let's switch over to you for a second and kind of ask your perspective as he's slowly studying all this history. And this is a very common narrative that
Sure.
one of the two starts studying history or is bothered by the church's LGBT stances. And over the years, they start to become less firm, more questioning.
Right.
I have to almost think, though, that maybe your upbringing as a less uptight Mormon might give you a little latitude where it's just like, yeah, my parents weren't super intense. I'm not super intense.
Yeah.
Church isn't what I thought.
That's
but-
exactly right.
Is that right?
Yep,
So it
that's
wasn't
exactly right.
Maybe it wasn't some huge, big, awful emergency.
Yeah.
It was just like, it's not what I thought. And,
Right.
Yeah.
But we'll stay in it because that's what you do. And
We have friends whose families are very in it
Rigid.
and strict, and it's definitely a different story for them.
Been harder for them.
It's
yeah.
harder for sure.
I think maybe Natasha Helfer Parker said that on one of your shows once or maybe one of her shows, I can't remember, that the more orthodox a family is, the harder it is to deal with a faith transition. And so we didn't really have that. I didn't have that.
Yeah.
It wasn't that hard for me to just be like,
But it was hard. I mean, what you went through was a lot. Let's not downplay that.
I appreciate
and
that.
it was a lot for us.
Yeah.
But luckily we didn't have the stress of the family pressure on top of it. Right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So Polly, tell us how you experienced his investigations and
Okay.
the weakening of his faith.
Yeah.
Were you getting nervous? Were you freaking out?
I don't think at first I was, because Justin's the type to need information about everything, and he researches, and that's him. He just needs whatever he can get.
yeah.
Right? Loves
think so.
books. I mean, English major, like that's him, wants to study. And so at first when he was going through all that, I didn't think much of it. But I think as it kept going, and then he would come home and be like, oh my gosh, you've got to hear this about Joseph Smith or this. And I remember one time we were in the car driving, and he's like, did you know this happened? And he kept talking, and I was like, I don't want to hear this. And I finally just was crying, and I'm like, I don't want to hear this. Like he's so excited about this information he's hearing, and he's got all these truths and resources and this, but I think it's hard for him to get that I'm not that type of person. I don't need all the information. I don't need this. Like, let me be where I am.
Yeah.
Yeah, which was really hard for you because you're
Because I'm like, how could you not want to hear this? This is so fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
It was definitely hard to balance that out. And it was hard on us, hard on our marriage. He would
for
want
sure.
to share things, what he's learned, and he'd be frustrated that I didn't want to learn it or that I still wanted to go to church. And it's hard to fill that out. Yeah.
Well, let's dig into that just a tiny bit. So I think there's always kind of a few perspectives when a couple's in a mixed faith marriage. So the non-believer usually feels a couple things. It's like, number one, you're supposed to be my partner, you're supposed to be my everything, and you're supposed to trust me and think I'm smart and wise. I don't want to go through this alone. This is hard, or it's exciting, or whatever it is. I want to share it with my soulmate. And there's that sort of like the companionship element, right? That can be a real disappointment if your partner's just not into it. It's just like, what? Do I go tell it to my high school girlfriend? Do I go online?
Who do I talk to?
Who do I talk to?
Right.
I can't talk to my parents, maybe,
Right.
or I should be able to talk to you. So that's one element. And then there's like the element that is, and I talk about in Mormon Stories, the validity versus the utility paradigm. Validity is the church true or not? And some people really care if it's true or not. And if it's true, I'll march to China and back because it's true. But if it's not true, I'm out. You know what I mean? There's other people who have the validity, that have the utility perspective, which is, I don't totally care if it's true. I mean, in the back of my mind, I believe it's true, but it's just working for me. And if it's working, it's working. So I want to just give
That's totally
sort of,
us.
Yeah.
Right
Yeah,
there.
it was a utility perspective for sure.
Yeah.
So Justin was the validity and you, Polly, were the utility.
No, I think we were both utility. I don't think I was a validity guy.
Oh, I think you were like, once you read a few things and this, and you're like, yeah, I can't do this. I'm done.
Well, that's fair, but I think it was more along the lines of, for a long time, we were hearing and learning these things that we were not okay with. So the Mountain Meadows Massacre, I was not okay with that, ever. And we went and saw a non-Mormon documentary about it, and those people were pissed about it. These were families from Arkansas. And I remember...
Whose ancestors were slaughtered.
Yes. Yeah. And I remember back then, it was a utilitarian thing for me. It was like, well, yeah, that's a mistake. Like I said earlier, prophets, leaders, people are fallible. That's not why I'm in the church. The church offers this, and this. So maybe I was a mix. I don't know.
Yeah.
But to me, back then, it was very a utility thing, utilitarian. But then in the 2015, 2016, those bricks in the wall got to where the wall got so oppressive to me that I was like, no way.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not buying this
Yeah.
anymore.
So I'm going to jump to you for a second, Justin, then I want to
Okay.
jump right back to you, Polly.
That's great.
So for the mixed faith couples that are listening now, Justin, tell the believing listeners who are listening what it's like to go through all this discovery and to want to share it with somebody, and why you want to share it with them, and what it's like to just sit there without
And what it feels like to not.
to not be able to.
So it's super difficult. And Polly has made this point many times. It's also, I understand that it is hard for the person who still believes. And I understood that then. And I don't think there's any way for me to understand fully how hard it was. But so I tried very hard. I understood always that faith is a precarious thing and that you need to be careful with other people's faith. And so I tried really hard to be careful, and that is tough. Because you do want to share. You do want to have someone to talk with. I got really lucky because I have a close group of friends, some buddies, who basically started going through this at the same time. And we all kind of went through it together. And I think a lot of those guys had spouses who didn't want to hear. And so we would go get coffee together and talk. And so I had an outlet. So I might not be the greatest example for how hard that is for someone who can't talk about it, because I could talk about it, but it was really difficult that I couldn't talk about it with Polly. And I think what was even more difficult than not being able to talk about it, it was that when we did, I just would approach it and be like, wait, this happened. Like, this is verifiable. We know this. There were just these... The cognitive dissonance became so great that I would say these things to Polly, and she just, what was so difficult is that sometimes she was not coming with me in those beliefs, or in disbelieving, or in changing the way I saw things. Sometimes I just could not believe that Polly wasn't coming with me on that.
Yeah.
And that was really, really, really hard.
Why'd you want her to come with you? Why'd you need her to come with you?
Well, it's maybe it's not that I needed her to come with me. It's that I was afraid of what would happen if she didn't.
What were your fears?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. I think my fears were, she's not going to love me. We're going to grow apart. Our differences are going to become irreconcilable. At the time when this started getting really heavy, we already had 3 kids. And we both love our kids so much, and I'm sure everyone does. And I just could not imagine a world where I didn't wake up every day and go to bed every day with my kids, like right there, you know? And so I was really afraid of that because I did see that a lot of people, I mean, listening to your show and listening to other people, and just, it's funny when you start going through this faith transition, people come out of the woodwork who are also going through it. And they're needing somebody to talk to because they're in the same boat. They don't have a spouse they can talk to, or they don't have a friend they can talk to, or whatever it may be. So you start hearing from all these people who are struggling. And a lot of times what you hear is that they're getting divorced and that they're losing their wife or their husband or their parents or their best friends or their job, or I mean, you get it. And I'm hearing all this and I'm seeing all this happening, and I didn't want that. I love Polly. I wanted us to be able to stay married.
Yeah. And so there's a core intimacy piece, which is just when you're close to someone, you want to be able to share everything. And if you can't, that can feel like a breach of emotional intimacy.
Yeah.
Which can lead to you needing to find connection or intimacy outside the marriage, preferably with someone who you're not sexually attracted to. But even if you're not sexually attracted to somebody, you still want to think that it's always your spouse that you can tell everything to and be totally connected with. It can get perilous if your non-believing spouse feels like they have to confide in somebody and it happens to be somebody that doesn't totally respect the marriage or whatever. And so that can be perilous too. And of course, the believing spouse can become super scared about who's he hanging out with, who are all these ex-Mormon groups, and what are their values, and are they respecting the marriage, and what could happen there. So that's all a thing. And so you don't want to grow apart, but also you can become depressed and anxious and lonely, and that's not good either, just for your own personal mental health. So Justin, I'm super happy that you were able to find some buddies.
Oh, it was so helpful.
Be able to talk to, because that's huge.
It was so helpful.
But it's still hard.
It was so hard.
It's still hard.
It was so hard.
So, I can see why you would want to bring her along, share with her, confide in her.
Absolutely.
And that's all supernatural.
Yep.
So, all right. So, Polly.
So he brought me to the Mormon Stories Retreat. That's what he did.
Well, before then, so Polly, from your perspective now, I don't know if you were conscious about these processes that he was experiencing. Not wanting to grow apart, not wanting to lose you, not wanting to be alone, having someone to connect with. And maybe the part of it, Justin, is just us, and this is tricky, but like from the non-believer's perspective or the doubter's perspective, it's like, well, doesn't she care about truth? Doesn't she care about reality? Like, doesn't she want to base, and that's a very insulting thing from the believing perspective.
Right.
But no, Justin, I'm not trying to project on you, but is that...
Yeah, there were some times when I felt that for sure.
Yeah. It's like,
yep. It's like, wait, what? Like I said, this happened. It's verifiable, I went to lunch one day with my good friend with Grant Palmer. And I mean, this guy was such a sweetheart. And he was just the most lovable, kind guy. And I could not, after meeting with this guy and reading his books and listening to his interviews, it was like, how do you not believe what this guy's saying? Yeah. So sometimes I would be like, wait, this is plain as day. You should see this.
Yeah.
And that's not fair.
No, not at all.
It's not fair.
But we're just sharing perspective.
Right. Yeah, I did feel that.
So now it's time for Polly's perspective. Okay, so Polly, how do you respond to all of this?
Well, it's interesting because I'm not looking at that at all. My perspective is we are sealed and we committed to live this way with our family, and you're going to back out on it. Now what? That's what I'm feeling, and that's what I'm thinking.
Contract, right? Yeah.
Our deal was to get married in the temple, and that doesn't mean you just go once and get married. Like, you're sealed. We're sealed together. And if you're not active and not going, like, you're breaking that deal. Right. Do you know what I mean? So that's what I'm thinking. Like, we both have our fears, and I'm thinking, can I be married to someone that isn't a member?
Yeah.
Like, this is what I've always wanted. This was on my list. Like, what now what? Now what happens? What do I do? So that's what's going through my mind when when you're thinking all these things, I'm thinking that too.
Right.
It's so hard.
So what about, let's have you respond to each of these items that we covered, and then have you bring up your own. Okay. So were you conscious of the fact, let's just say his own mental health and well-being? Were you conscious of the fact that he was going through something hard or traumatic or important to him?
Yes.
And that you were basically saying, I can't go there with you.
Yeah.
And were you concerned about his well-being going through that alone? And then the second part of that question is, were you concerned about the implications for the marriage if you did go there with him, and then if you didn't go there with him? Because there's risks both ways, right?
Totally.
There's risks if you do go there with him.
Yeah.
But you probably perceive risks I don't know if you perceived risks if you didn't.
Yeah, I
So
saw
talk
risks
about all
both
that.
ways for sure.
So talk about that. So
Yeah.
so he's coming to you, Mount Mills Massacre, polygamy, Joseph Smith, rawr.
But I will say I was a good listener. There were only a
for
handful
sure.
of times where I was like, I can't. But he would send me podcasts and I would listen.
Whoa.
He would send
So
me,
that's actually
but he knew which ones to
remarkable.
send me.
I mean, you can say if not, but I think I was careful.
You were very careful.
Yeah.
But
Which ones
I
did he
tried.
send you? Do you
He
remember?
sent me, he knew which ones would get me to listen.
Richard Bushman.
Richard Bushman
Polly and
and the security guy.
Polly loves older people.
So non-believer couple people listen to this list.
Yeah.
And you can share this list with your
Yeah.
spouses. So
And who was
Richard
that one
Bushman,
with that from England? That
Oh, he was
accent?
so good. The guy who had his calling and election.
Phillips?
Yes.
You didn't mind the Tom Phillips interview?
Oh, it broke my heart.
Uh-huh.
My heart went out
This
to
poor
him.
guy talking about his family leaving
Yeah,
him and
Because he had
just-
been state president
Yeah.
twice. And
But I think
knew
hearing
Jeffrey
that,
Holland. And
Yes.
Exactly.
got his second
yes,
anointing.
that
Yeah,
was,
that's right.
That was
and then
so
he loses
good.
his faith, and what happens?
Yep.
What does his family do?
They leave him. Like,
talk to him.
maybe that's
We're
why he
laughing,
sent
but
me
it's
this.
terrible.
Maybe that's why he sent me this. Like,
Don't
don't
do
make
this.
me be
Yeah.
like this. But
So were you, like some would say that's a really scary, the Tom Phillips interview, which is one of the top 3 Mormon Stories interviews of all time.
Oh, really?
Some would say that's a really scary one to send to your believing spouse. But for you,
I just know that Polly really feels an affinity with older people. And so Sandra Tanner,
yeah,
she loved Sandra
Loved him.
Tanner's interview. Right? And we went to her bookstore.
she's like Satan. She's like evil, according to Mormon lore, right?
We went down there. Remember, we went to her bookstore. Polly loved it because she's just this cute old lady. She's not trying to hurt anybody. She's just telling her story.
what did you send me? No, just
Yeah.
kidding. Yeah, he would send me few that he knew that I would have empathy toward and just feel for these people.
And that would resonate with you.
Yeah.
I thought I knew you
He
well
didn't
enough
send
to
me a
know.
lot of anything that was like bashing the church really hard.
Like I didn't send Grant Palmer's. You didn't listen to Grant Palmer's discussion about the laws until years later.
Yeah.
But you did listen to it.
I did.
And you came back and you were like, oh my gosh.
I came back and I said, buy me that biography.
Yeah, she
Where's
wants
his journal? I want to read
William
it.
Law's journal.
So I
Yeah.
do enjoy history and I do enjoy things. And I guess I have a fine line of what's pushing me and what's not. Because hearing other people's stories and their experiences, my heart just goes out to them. And I think it makes me better understand what he's going through and maybe more supportive instead of like this, like I don't believe that. I think I was okay with where I was in my bubble and just was able to hopefully connect with you in a different way.
Yeah. And you did.
And help you. Yeah.
I think another good example would be I would listen to a lot of the Mormon Expressions podcast with
Dan
John
Witherspoon.
John Larson.
Sorry, John Larson.
Yeah, and I did also listen to a lot of Dan Witherspoon. I sent you some Dan Witherspoon. He's so awesome.
That's Mormon Matters.
Mormon Matters.
I only
Yeah.
listen to 1 out of every 10. I've
Yeah.
got 4 kids. I cannot listen to the podcast.
But
right?
the John Larson stuff, I found it so fascinating. But I wasn't going to send that to Paulie because he was a little more antagonistic about his approach to what was going on. Same with like Infants on Thrones. I didn't send you that stuff because I didn't want to. Again, faith is a precarious thing, and it wasn't. I was trying not to rock your boat.
Yeah.
Too badly.
So here's where, sometimes when I choose someone for an interview, it fits with some people and doesn't fit with others. we're getting messages from some of our listeners, like Jamie writes. Let's see. No. Tammy writes, "I wish I could get my husband to listen or read. He absolutely refuses." And then Jennifer writes, "Me too," replying to Tammy. And so it seems like you, Polly, were kind of in the 99th percentile for openness and willingness to listen. And because really when somebody's, and this would have been after my excommunication, because 2015 I was excommunicated.
Yeah, because he sent me that too.
She was so mad, by the way. You
Yeah,
remember
that
that?
broke my heart.
I knew that
really
was going
hard
to
thing
help.
to listen to. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And
Yeah.
but I guess what I'm getting at is there is a class of Orthodox Mormon
Right.
that's just like, is it approved by the church? Is this faithful?
Right.
If I get a bad feeling, they're talking about hard things. Oh, this is John Boleyn, or I'm not going to listen to apostates, and they just shut down
Yeah.
and they won't even consider it. So you're already in like the 95th percentile.
Well, let
just
me
because
say-
you were open.
Well, thank you. But this didn't happen in 6 months. This happened in 6 years.
Oh, okay.
So going really slow, like that's my advice to anybody. Don't
So
push it.
Justin went slowly.
Yes, don't push it. Just take your time. And even if like you're out, you're out, I don't know, just be gentle and go slow with what information or what things you're proposing. Take time. Like even with you drinking coffee, that was really hard.
Right.
But just like ease into things and give your spouse time to think about it and figure it out. And, just,
And we made some mistakes along this way.
yeah.
But
I think that helps. This wasn't a 3-month
You're right.
period where he was sending me stuff and I was okay with it. Like
it took a long
time.
Okay, so Polly, what I hear you saying is that Justin maybe was patient and thoughtful
Very.
about
you.
the things he'd share with you.
Yeah.
It's nice of you to say.
And maybe it'll be different for every person what,
Yeah.
so if you're the non-believing spouse and you want to share something with your believing spouse, be thoughtful about it.
Yep.
Be patient, take your time. And when I say be thoughtful, I mean think about what types of stories will feel safe or will
Right.
resonate.
Right.
Well, and that's what I love about Marriage on a Tightrope podcast. And Alan just joined us, and he gave a shout
Alan.
out
Yeah.
to you guys. But that's what's great about Marriage on a Tightrope podcast is it's got a believer. Katie's a believer,
Right.
Alan's not, and so believers can feel more. If your spouse isn't going to resonate with the evil, horrible apostate John Dehlin. But they will with Alan and Katie Mount. Freaking listen to Marriage on a Tightrope podcast.
Yeah,
or
they're amazing.
Mormon Matters or
Yeah.
whatever faithful podcasts are out there.
Yep.
But be, as a non-believer, be patient, be careful, be thoughtful about what you share and give it lots of time.
I think so. But I do think you kind of knew what you were doing. I mean, you wanted me to know what you were reading and listening to and all that.
Right.
So you would do it carefully. Like
So-
we went and heard, who was that couple we heard speak with Matt and Breck in that backyard?
Oh, Terrell and Fiona Gibbons.
Yeah. So we would go hear them speak together, which
Because how do you not? So I think what you're getting at is that I would
We
give you
found-
sources that were exposing some of the truths about our church without saying the church is awful and you should leave.
right.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was super careful. I mean, a really great resource is A Rough Stone Rolling because the church sells it.
Right.
It's a great resource.
And I still haven't read it. I don't have a desire to
But
read
you
it.
know most of what's
But
in
I
it.
guess I do.
Yeah.
And eventually, as this has gone on years and years and years and years and years, I feel like I know everything you know.
Yeah.
I've finally come to be like, okay, this is how it's going to be. This is who we are. And I'm okay with, and it's really hard for Justin that I'm okay. I keep saying in my bubble, like I'm comfortable and I'm happy with where I am. And it's just, that's how I want it to be.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But Polly, and by the way, Katie's watching with Alan, so shout out
Hi,
to
Katie.
you as
Hi,
well.
Katie.
We love you guys.
Katie, I'm getting a couch. Just kidding.
Yeah, so kudos to Justin for being patient and
Thank
being
you.
thoughtful about what he shares. kudos to Polly for being open and willing to consider things and to hear things and to connect. So those are great role models for our listeners.
Can I just tell one
Kudos to all the content providers that provide us stuff to help
it's
you.
awesome.
Can I say one more thing about
please,
that? A really great example of what you just described with Polly is when we went to your Mormon Stories
can we
Retreat.
talk about that? That was
Sure.
huge for us.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because
So wait, let me start by saying this.
yeah.
It's our anniversary, and Justin's like, "Hey, I have an idea to do something different," and I was like, "Okay," and he's like, "I want to go to this Mormon Stories Retreat," and I was
for our anniversary.
I was like, "John DeLynn,
Super romantic.
who?" And I was a little nervous, but I knew he needed it, and I thought, "Okay, if there's a lot of church bashing, I will just leave the room." You know, I felt like I could walk out, I could make it safe. I was nervous, but I knew he needed it.
And I think that's what I wanted to say was that
Yeah.
when I proposed that to Polly, she was like, yeah, sure. You know, to your point, she was very open and accepting. And we'd been through the rounds on some issues, but for the most part, Polly's always just been willing to be open about it. And you always describe this bubble. I just don't think you're in the bubble that you describe anymore, you know, or maybe the bubble's really big now. So you have a lot of latitude in your bubble, but she was always very open and very willing to listen and to accept what I was going through.
Yeah, so a theme, and we're going to come right to you, Polly. A theme is bend so you don't break. If both of you can be flexible,
Yeah, I
right?
love that.
then the marriage won't break apart.
Because we don't want a divorce.
Right.
No.
I mean, so we go to this Mormon Stories Retreat
Well,
up
let me
in
ask
Park
you,
City.
by this time I'm excommunicated.
Yes.
The church has named me as one
Yep.
of the great 10 enemies of the church. I imagine there's a lot of believers where it's just like, no freaking way I'm going anywhere in the same room as John DeLynn.
Yes.
So what made you willing to do that?
Honestly, well, we'd met with you guys before because I think,
And Polly loved you guys.
yeah, I love your wife.
Me and Margie?
Yep.
Yeah.
You guys are awesome. And I felt safe with you guys. You had been members, so you kind of know how I'm feeling, what I'm going through, but you also know what he's going through. And so I felt like you guys were a safe couple. And I knew that going into it, but I also had heard some of your podcasts and like your excommunication and these things. And it's just like, you're not this bad person that everyone says. I felt like I knew you. So I felt I was okay to go. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I really appreciated that
Yeah.
trust.
It definitely, you guys are amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and I'll let you talk about the experience, but we definitely, when Natasha Alford Parker and I designed these retreats together, our goal was to, number one, to make believers feel safe. You want non-believers and people going through a faith crisis to feel validated, but many of them are going to bring their non-believing spouses. And our goal is never to rip on the church. We almost rarely talk about
Yeah,
the church.
you don't.
Yeah, it's just about it's about
Yeah.
navigating the faith crisis, about
Yep.
creating a new world, about communicating with believing family and friends.
And it was nothing about
mental
marriage.
health. Yeah.
It was just, we just happened to go together.
Well, it
Yeah.
was. I mean, their conference was about marriage for sure. They talked a lot about emotional intimacy and vulnerability
but
and all that.
I don't think it was for a marriage retreat, was it?
No, I don't think it was for a mixed
No,
faith.
singles go.
Yeah,
Yes.
Single people
Yeah, yeah.
go for sure.
Right.
And I
Yeah.
think were there two of us that were
Yeah.
believers?
Yeah.
Me and another wife.
Sometimes it's up to a third. It just
Yeah.
depends. Yeah.
So I definitely was
You were in the minority.
totally, and I was way out of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
I thought, oh crap, what did I do?
But remember how many people came up to you afterward
Yeah.
and they were like, thank you for being here because now we can see that all. Remember the one guy? He was like, now I know that all my active Mormon neighbors don't hate me.
Yeah.
Because you don't hate them?
Yeah.
Right.
So I feel like we went, and what it did, it was like a therapy session for us.
For a whole weekend.
It connected us, and it just, you need to go to these. Can I just tell
Yeah,
everyone
these
this?
people who are saying that they're struggling and that their husbands won't listen or their
Yeah.
spouse won't listen.
It is
Try to get them to
amazing.
go to one of these conferences because it really, I mean, if I can say this, I know I'm talking a lot and I don't want to talk over you, but we had that moment where I knew that this was why we were there.
Yeah.
Because you remember, I was like, I just feel like we need to be there. Like there's going to be some opportunity there. I don't know what it is. And then the opportunity did come
Well,
where...
John picked on me quite a bit. I feel like I had the mic a lot.
Yeah.
I was very nervous.
Yeah.
Well, part of what I'm doing there is all these people are coming trying not to blow up their world as they go through a faith crisis.
Yeah.
Which means offend their spouse, offend their parents, offend their kids,
Totally.
offend their ward, offend their boss. And so it's tough on the believers that come a little bit, but I'm like, hey, we've got believers in the room. So if we're going to learn how to communicate effectively with believers, let's start right now. Let's have conversations that are respectful
Yeah.
and kind and affirming and validating.
Yeah.
And so believers, I kind of like try to celebrate and applaud believers and make them feel super comfortable. And then I kind of help bring them into the retreats. Natasha and I both do this so that we can start practicing what people are going to experience when they go out.
And it worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It gave me the opportunity you opened it up. Does anyone want to say anything here or feel like you need to say anything? And that was the moment that I'd been waiting for, I think, even though I didn't know it. And I was able to kind of say in front of all these people and in front of Polly how I felt, and that I was not going backward in my belief, that I was not ever going to be that same believing member again. And that was a hard thing for me to say to Polly because I was so afraid of the consequences of divorce or whatever might happen, even though I think I could say I should have had more faith that you would be okay, but it's freaking scary. And that gave me the place to say it. It was safe. Polly was vulnerable. I was vulnerable, and you listened. Mm-hmm. And then, I mean, everything from then has gotten better.
Yeah. And being there for me as the believer, seeing all these people that are going through this transition or crisis, whatever you want to call it. I mean, it's rough. Like your heart just goes out to these people, and it's so good to see and hear these stories. And just, it's not like Justin looked for this. You know what I mean? Like you didn't look.
Yeah, it happens to people.
Yeah, it just happens, and it's emotional. And I mean, it was good for me to see. It gave me more patience and more empathy and sympathy for all these people going through this. It's a lot. It's hard. Yeah. It was awesome to go to.
Yeah, it's really close and intense when it's your own marriage. Mm-hmm. But if you're a believer and you come to these retreats and you see 50 other people who are going through the same thing, and you're able to see some believing couples as well, it's like, oh my gosh, my husband's or my spouse isn't broken.
Yep.
Other people are going through this. This isn't some life-ending thing.
Totally.
We can make it through this. And so, like, I think, I almost want to say that the content that Natasha and I share is maybe a third of what's actually valuable. A third is the processing of people's experiences. And then a third is just the people you meet and the interactions you have with the community. And this, by the way, this episode, we didn't talk about this before.
Yeah.
We are not doing these episodes to get people to come to retreats.
No.
Although if it's going to help your marriage, we want you to come.
Yeah.
But that's not why we're doing this. We've done these things for years, and we do it not because I don't, because I've got all the spare time on my hands and I don't have things to do. We literally only do these retreats because they help people. So I appreciate you guys bringing that up, but I just want audience to know we're doing this because it saves marriages and saves lives.
Yep.
But do you guys agree with that idea that the processing and the people you meet in the community maybe is as important as the content?
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah, it's definitely important.
Yeah.
Right? The people that were there and the processing, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and it helped
the content's great, though.
Helped me see that there were so many other people going in it. It wasn't just you and a few buddies. Right. And it can work. Like I can still do my thing, you can do your thing.
Right.
But we're raised in a church that teaches you it doesn't work that way. It's this way or it doesn't work. You know what I mean? So that's hard to get over.
Do you remember this? To your point, John, that the community that was there, the people that were there, I remember you talked about this a lot, Polly, that there were several people there who were with their spouse who said when their spouse lost their faith, they went to their bishop or to a priesthood leader, and that priesthood leader said, you would be better off divorced.
Yeah, I do remember.
Their advice was to get divorced. And you were sitting there like, what?
Yeah.
You
crazy.
No, why would you wouldn't get divorced over this, right? You remember that?
I do.
Yeah. So the people were so helpful. And it does sound like we're trying to sell this Mormons. Like, we're just huge fans. It helped us.
Yeah.
That's all there is to it.
And Natasha, you brought up Natasha. her stuff helped us too.
Oh yeah,
We listened to her a lot.
she's so great.
And part of why we bring Natasha, why I partner with Natasha, she's a licensed marriage and family therapist, and she's a licensed sex therapist. So she gives talks about marriage, about intimacy, about sex. And that's all important stuff, especially going through a faith crisis. Sometimes couples have a sexual reawakening or a sexual revolution or whatever. And that's one of the benefits, potentially, but also people can get in trouble.
Maybe we'll have
sexually. What's that?
Maybe we'll have that.
Yeah.
A real quick shout out to Amy Germer, who's joined in. She and her husband Miles came to, we actually have done a couple mixed faith marriage retreats where 20 couples
Oh,
who are
wow.
all in mixed faith marriages come. We bring a believing therapist like Julie D'Azevedo Hanks, and we do a whole weekend with all mixed faith couples.
That would be fun.
That's cool.
And those have been amazing, the few
Yeah.
that we've done. If there's listeners who are interested, reach out. We'll make those things happen as well. Let me anything else you guys want to say about the retreat, or
No,
we covered
it was awesome.
It was awesome.
Yep.